Welcome, everybody. Sorry to interrupt your party. Sounds like you're having a great time here. You are? Okay, good. Well, you're about to have a better time because we're going to bring you some real good music. Welcome to the Westminster Town Hall Forum. I'm Tim Hart Anderson. I'm the senior minister here at Westminster Presbyterian Church and moderator of this evening's forum with Eric Holder. We're pleased to have an opening musical performance for you today by Jearlyn Steele, accompanied on, accompanied by her brother Fred on the piano. They are part, as we all know, of an internationally acclaimed family, a Minnesota music treasure. They performed on stages across our state, across our country, and even around the world. Jearlyn has sung with the Minnesota Orchestra across the street and in St. Paul with Prairie Home Companion and even with Prince. So we're grateful that you're here, honored to have you here to kick off this forum with Eric Holder. Please join me now in welcoming Jearlyn Steele and Fred Steele.
My brother just made it in time. Look at God working. Good evening, everyone. I am so honored to be here to sing for you for half an hour. And I must say that just feeling your presence made a difference for me. I was one of the first to come in through the doors in the parking lot and just meeting and greeting you. Those of you that are members, please raise your hand. I'd love to see how many are members that are here tonight. Oh, you are so beautiful. So thank you for the welcome, be it silent or be it spoken. I'll begin with a prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. You said you would supply all our needs according to your riches. I have but to ask, and I shall receive. To go from here and share this love you gave it to me, to show someone who's lost and help him find the way. When I asked Tane Danger when he called me and asked if I would do this tonight, and of course there was a resounding yes in my soul, I said to him, "What can't I sing?" Of course, one of the songs I would love to sing goes a little bit like this, but I'm not doing this tonight, but just a tidbit of it, Fred, so hold on. This is a song that I've always loved to sing, and to this day I don't think I've ever sang all of it. If I should stay, I would only be in your way. So I'll go, but I know I'll think of you every step of the way. Ladies that are walking out, I think they're waving at you over here. Keep waving, keep waving, keep waving. Do they see you? Do they see you? Yeah? Okay, that's enough of that song. Oh, goodness. One day I will get to sing that song. Then there's a song that my family and I love to sing. It's by Etta James. Now, Etta James, oh my. I had the chance to go see her in concert. And you know, she sat down in a chair most of the time, but when she got up, it was fire. It was incredible. So here we go. Oh, sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah, yeah. Yes, I get a feeling that I never had before, no. Yes, I want to tell you right now that I believe, I really do believe that something's got a hold on me, yeah. Oh, it must be love. Oh, something's got a hold of me right now, child. Oh, it must be love. Let me tell you now, I never felt like this before. Something got a hold of me and won't let go. Believe I died, even if I could. Sure feels strange, sure feels good. I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah. Oh, it must be love. All right, come on. Let me tell you now, something's got a hold on me, yeah. Oh, something's got a hold of me right now, child. Let me tell you now, I never felt like this before. Something's got a hold of me and won't let go. Believe I die, even if I could. Sure feels strange, it sure feels good. I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah. Oh, it must be love. You know it walks like a love. You know it talks like a love. Hey, makes me feel all right in the middle of the night. La 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 la. Hey, la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Woo! I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah. Oh, it must be love. You know it must be. It must be love. Where's Celia? The music always moves me. It is the moment every day, every morning I sing every day. And I love the way it feels. It's healing for me. Sometimes the music makes me angry, but most importantly, it makes me know and helps me to understand what true love is. And it comes in so many vessels from time to time. Well, I kept wondering, one song that I've learned a long time ago and fell in love with it was an Aretha Franklin tune. And the only reason that the song meant so much to me is because I was going through divorce. I would ask you to raise your hands if you're divorced, but I won't. I will not. Right? This is a little song that I had a chance to sing with several people that you may know. And if I don't do it right, forgive me, or either come up and sing it by yourselves. Yeah. Yes. You know what song it is, right? Do you know? 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 Here we go. What you want, baby, I got it. What you need, you know I got it. See, here's the thing. It just doesn't feel right for this event, does it? You want me to what? You want me to keep going? You want to come sing it? They never want to come sing it. I'm about to give you all my money, but guess what? In return, honey, give me my profits when you get home. Okay, that's enough of that. I feel guilty. I keep looking around to see if there are any statues of Jesus out here or any. I'm about to give you. I really should stop, shouldn't I? Yeah, right? I should stop. There's a man in the back who's smiling and never nodding. Never nodding. Come on, just a little bit. Come on, just a little bit, y'all. You know, sometimes it only takes a little bit. You get mad at your husband, you get mad at your wife, just start talking about how you love his respect and how he loves your respect. Okay, Fred, that's enough of that. Jesus is watching, you know. There is a song about that respect song, though. I'm sorry, not a song, but a story. I was in A Prairie Home Companion, the movie. I don't know if you all saw me in that, but if you did, thank you for watching. And of course, I had a chance to work with the greats, Meryl Streep and Lily Tomlin, and so many of them. And I had a chance to go to St. Louis and actually sing Respect for the 40th anniversary. And when I got out there for the chorus, I was so excited, right? Oh my God, it's the 40th anniversary, and Jearlyn Steele gets to sing this on the stage in St. Louis. Oh my God. And all of a sudden, we're like, just a little bit, come on, just a little bit, and read, all of that, right? And then it was time to spell the word. R-E-C-C-T-C-P. No kidding. No kidding. This is the truth, right? And I'm looking around because the people go, Where that girl from? Where that girl from? So all of a sudden I ran back to Garrison Keeley and I said, sir, please, don't let me go down in history as a girl that couldn't spell respect. And he looked at me and said, okay, I'm just gonna give you one more reprise. Go. R-E-S-P-C-T, find out what it means to me. R-E-S-P-C-T, take care, T-C-B. Yeah. But now I stay away from that song. Fred doesn't know I'm gonna sing this song because it just came to me that I need to sing it for someone who needs it. So here we go. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. If you want to sing along, you can. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, God's hands have provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto thee. Do I have more time? Thank you, Tam. I have so many songs that I want to sing tonight. I'm trying to choose, so forgive me. If you have a selection that you'd like for me to sing and you want to suggest it, let me know, and you come on up and sing it. This is a song called Center of My Joy. And every morning when I get up and I start singing, whether I'm sitting on the side of the bed, or whether I'm in the restroom, or down in the basement in the pantry trying to figure out what I should cook for Mom, as her primary caregiver, I'm honored to do it. She's probably the happiest quarantine woman I know at 88 degrees. She said to me not long ago, she says, Jearlyn, this is your last year for your master's degree at Luther Seminary. Hurry up, honey. I need you to hurry up so I can be there. And I will continue to sing and pray with her and know that wherever she is, whether she's right in front of me where I can touch her or not, I have been so blessed to have the mother of the Steeles, and we pamper her every day. Every day. Jesus, you're the center of my joy. All that's good and perfect comes from you. You're the heart of my contentment, hope for all I do. Jesus, you're the center of my joy. When I've lost my direction, you're the compass for my way. You're the fire and light when nights are long and cold. In sadness, are the laughter that shatters all my fears when I'm alone. Your hand is there to hold. Yeah, 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 yes, Jesus, you're the center of my joy. All that's good and perfect comes from you. You're the heart, hope for all I do. Jesus, you're the center of Jesus, you're the center of my life. Jesus, you're the center, yes. Jesus, you're the center, right here, right now, in the center of my chest. I know, I know, I know that you'll be there. Jesus, you're the center of my My sister Javita is Oscar nominated. She does not like for me to say that, so I have to do it when she's not in the room. But she recorded a song for a Whoopi Goldberg movie, and it's a simple hymn that we all know. It starts like this. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Sing with me. This little light of mine. Come on, come on. I'm gonna let it shine. Come on. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yes, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Now, if there's one thing we need, we absolutely need the sun to shine in our hearts, right? I don't want to have to come over to you and give you a big hug and all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, what are you doing? Don't do that, right? That happens, right? You know, some of you will come over and say, I want to shake your hand, but no, you know, it is COVID time. I get that. But if it's not COVID time and you don't have a mask on, shake my hand. Shake my hand, because the bottom line is that we are sentient beings. We need to be touched. We need to be loved. We need to be held. We need to be hugged. And if I come over to some of y'all, you're gonna back up. You're gonna back up, right? And some of you might come to me and I might back up. Is that Jamie? James Morocco? No? Okay, I'm wrong. So whatever you do, find someone to hug. Find someone to hold their hand. Find someone to share that hug and really mean it. You know how some people go, yeah. That sort of thing. When I hug, I hug. So you better be ready for it. Anybody want a hug right now? All right. So someone is gonna have to tell me what time it is, because I'll keep going like the ever-ready battery, right? Oh. Thank you all for letting us be a part of this amazing night. Thank you. Fred Steele.
The congregation may be seated. So I came out here and I hear Jearlyn singing. I see you all singing, but I don't see her. She's working the crowd. Jearlyn, thank you very much for this, and thank your brother Fred. It's awesome. The Attorney General sitting over there thinking, this is going to be a hard act to follow. Welcome to the Westminster Town Hall Forum. My name is Tim Hart Anderson. I'm the senior minister here at Westminster Presbyterian Church, located on Nicollet Mall in beautiful downtown Minneapolis, and I'm the moderator of the forum. Today we're pleased to welcome former United States Attorney General Eric Holder to the forum. You warmed them up. We're so grateful tonight to have the Minneapolis Foundation as a co-sponsor of tonight's program, and they've got a bunch of reserved pews. I think, is it in this section? Where are you, Minneapolis Foundation? Over there. RT, where are you? Are you out here someplace? Okay, RT Ryback, the CEO and president of the foundation. Thank you very much, former mayor. We know what they do at the Minneapolis Foundation. They drive collective action to realize strong and vibrant communities. Their work is with donors to help them act on behalf of key issues, great social, civic, economic needs in our community, and we are grateful to the foundation, especially grateful for their support tonight to make this possible. Learn more at minneapolisfoundation.org. For more than 40 years, the Westminster Town Hall Forum has invited speakers of conscience to address issues of the day from an ethical perspective. This fall, we're presenting a four-part series called Healing Our House Divided. We've invited 4 intellectually diverse speakers to address the polarization in our country and world. We've asked each of them to offer ways to bridge our divisions and build a more respectful, pluralistic society. We invite you to visit westminsterforum.org to watch our previous programs with Habitat for Humanity CEO Jonathan Reckford, with Professor Lisa Pruitt on the rural-urban divide, and you'll also find information there about our upcoming December 8 forum with international conflict and peace scholar Chris Blattman. All of these programs, including this evening's, are made possible because of all of us in this room, individual supporters. Even with good co-sponsors like the foundation, individuals really are the largest share of the support for maintaining and sustaining these important programs. So if you're able, we invite you to consider supporting the Town Hall Forum. And with Thanksgiving this week, we invite you especially to show your gratitude for the forum by making a gift to keep these important community conversations going. For those of you here in person, there are donation envelopes in your program materials. If you're watching via the live stream, we welcome you. Wish you were here in person. I don't know where you are, but Minnesota is perfect this time of year. It's about 30 degrees out and lovely. And you online can go to westminsterforum.org/donate. And thanks, as always, to Minnesota Public Radio for recording and broadcasting all of our forums. NPR is presenting the Town Hall Forum's fall season in a special one-week series of programs. You'll be able to hear all 4 of our talks the week of December 5, which is coming up. One program will air each day at noon, including a live broadcast. You can come to it Thursday, December 8th, right here in the church. And thanks as well to our other media co-sponsors, MinnPost, which is a nonprofit independent newsroom for Minnesotans exploring challenges and opportunities facing our state, including across political divides. Find them at minnpost.com. Thanks as well to our other media sponsor, Sahan Journal, dedicated to covering issues affecting Minnesota immigrants and communities of color. Find them at sahanjournal.com. In the second half of this evening's program, Mr. Holder will be taking questions from you, from the audience. Those of you here in the sanctuary, you should have a blank card to write a question on, and use that to record whatever's on your mind, and we'll pass them forward, and during the Q&A, we'll try to ask as many of them as possible to Mr. Holder. And if you're watching online, we don't want to leave you out of the dialogue as well. If you put in the chat feature whatever your question or comment is, we have people monitoring the chat, and that will get to us as well. Please note that if you're a student, and we did have some schools invited here. Are you here, students? Yes? Good. All right. Nice to have you here in the room. Yeah, okay. I told the Attorney General that we always have students here, and they always ask, Minnesota students always ask the best question, so we're counting on you. Following the program, we invite everybody here in the room to join us for Breads and Spreads, the traditional post-forum time of reception and beverages and refreshments and things to eat that'll be wonderful in the Westminster Hall to your right as you exit. And some of you came here in your car and parked in our wonderful underground parking garage. I'm glad you avail yourselves of that. The building closes at 8. If you decide you want to go out and go get something to eat or drink and come back at 8:30, we'll be glad to keep your car for you. So that's a nice way of saying we really do close our doors at 8. You're welcome to stay inside and kind of party with us till 9 or so, and you can easily leave at that point, but just wanted to make sure we don't get anybody stuck with their car downstairs. And Tane Danger, are you in the room? Tane, here he is, the director of the Westminster Town Hall Forum. Okay, now, it's It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's Westminster Town Hall Forum speaker. Eric Holder served as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States and the first African American to hold that position. He held the office as part of the Obama administration from February 2009 to April 2015, making him the third longest serving Attorney General in U.S. history. During his tenure, which some of us remember fondly, he championed hallmark legislation on voting rights, on immigration law, national security, and same-sex marriage. Following his tenure as Attorney General, Mr. Holder founded the National Democratic Redistricting Committee to work on bringing fair representation to American democracy. Mr. Holder's first book is Our Unfinished March: The Violent Past and Imperiled Future of the Vote, a history, a crisis, a plan. Co-authored with Sam Koppelman, it tells the history of the vote in America and urges new protections to perfect our democracy. Next Chapter Books is selling the book outside. Many of them are signed by Mr. Holder. Our Unfinished March is for sale after the forum outside. And now, please join me in welcoming to the Westminster Town Hall Forum, Eric Holder.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We love you in Minnesota.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Well, I haven't said a word and I got a standing ovation. I think I ought to leave like now, you know? It can only go downhill from here, you know?
It's because Jearlyn warmed him up.
I was going to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for joining us, Attorney General Holder. We're grateful for your presence, for your wisdom, for your service to the country, and for this conversation we're going to have tonight. A number of Americans these days feel like democracy is in crisis and imperiled, actually. And some Americans feel like that's kind of something happening under our watch, in our time. You, however, take a long view about the perils of democracy, the fragility, the precarious nature of American democracy, really from the start. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, first, I would agree that I think our democracy is under attack. I do think our democracy is a fragile thing, not something that we can take for granted. We're approaching our 250th year. But unless we pay more attention to the protection of our democracy, we have the potential to lose it. I'll talk about some history here, but just to kind of give you I don't want to be apocalyptic, but to give you a sense of the way I think of this, I think about Europe in the 20th century and the rise of fascism. That didn't happen because fascism was strong. It happened because the defense of democracy was weak. And unless we are strong in the defense of our democracy, we won't have a dictator necessarily, but our elections every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years could be rendered meaningless. Every generation of Americans has had to deal with issues around the protection of our democracy. We start off in the book, you know, as looking back to the beginning of the Republic, when only 6% of the people in the United States who we would consider now to be voter eligible actually cast a ballot for or were able to cast a ballot in the election that made George Washington our first president. Only 6%. And a substantial group of people, the first group of people who said, you know what, we ought to have the right to vote. That first group was white men who didn't own property, They said, you know, wait a minute. We fight in the wars, we do all these other things, we don't have the ability to vote. The founders, in putting our Constitution together, thought about that and said, well, you know, at least some said, well, you know, if you give white men who don't have property the right to vote, they don't have the intellectual capacity, they can be bribed, that's not a good thing. And the other thing is that if you do that, other groups of people will ask for the right to vote. And one of the founders says, well, can you imagine? Women will ask for the right to vote.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And so, so we start off with white men, then women get the right to vote. African Americans are granted the right to vote and then have to fight to regain the right to vote. So there have been constant challenges. in our nation's history about whose voice is heard, whose voice matters. And what we're facing today is similar to what other generations of Americans have faced. And I'm confident that this generation of Americans will rise to the challenge of as other generations of Americans have done in the past.
You titled your book, or someone titled your book, Our Unfinished
March.
March.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the R and what is the march?
And that's a really good question, because if I had to do this over, I would not have called it Our Unfinished March, because I think that in some ways gives people the impression that I'm talking about people of color, generally, or African Americans specifically. I would have retitled this America's Unfinished March, because it really deals with the history of, as I said, white men without property to all other segments of our society struggling to get the right to vote, struggling to be heard, fighting to be a part of this thing that we call American democracy. And it really is, the first part deals with the history, the second part deals with kind of where we are now, and the third part deals with some structural reforms that I think we need to consider to perfect this democracy of ours. I mean, this nation is better now than it was 50 years ago, and better than it was 50 years before that, but we're not yet at the place where, where we need to be. We're more perfect, but we're not perfect.
The reference, I took the reference to march, the word march in your book's title, to mean that we had to struggle. America had to struggle at each one of these thresholds to expand the franchise, to include more in the voting, and the move to, expand the democracy in this land.
Well, I mean, we tend to forget. Ours is a revolutionary society. I mean, the march began in the fight against the British. The first revolution, the first large-scale successful revolution that resulted in the democracy that we have. I mean, think about it. A bunch of ragtag people with arms and, not a really great standing army took on the mightiest empire in the world and birthed this nation. And so that march began there, and it continues today.
Doesn't that implicitly suggest, I guess, that to make progress, there's struggle. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, apparently, it's violent, hopefully nonviolent, but power does not give up. Basically, it's a question of giving up power, somebody giving up power so others have more.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. That's a very good point. This is all about the acquisition and the retention of power. At the end of the day, it's all about power. Again, whose voice matters, who will be heard. Those people who have power are reluctant to give it up. Those people without power hopefully will do that which is necessary to obtain the power to which they are entitled. It's been a constant pull and push throughout the history, of this nation.
The vote was originally conceived of as a privilege.
Right.
And over time, it's become known or seen as a right, mm-hmm. Which is an interesting semantic shift, and it says something about those who have power losing privilege, and it's not easy when that happens.
No, not at all. If you look at the way in which we were set up, it was a privilege. Again, white men without property don't have the right to vote, and even those who do have the right to vote, if you're talking about the presidency, well, you didn't really vote for the president. You were voting just to send people to the electoral college, and that they would then determine, who the president would be. Senators were not picked by, the direct popular vote until we had a constitutional amendment. So there have been constant attempts to make sure that those, again, who have power, try to keep those who don't have power, keep them away from power, and even if power is granted, to come up with filters so that that power is not necessarily directly felt. I mean, we are the only industrialized nation that goes through a democratic process where people cast ballots for the President of the United States, but ultimately you can, as we have seen twice in the last few times, you can get fewer popular votes and still win the election because you win in the electoral college. And as we say in the book, when you vote for class president, that person, the girl or the boy who gets the most votes is the class president. I mean, can you imagine a system where, all right, so Mary gets more votes than John, but because of some electoral college thing we got in the third grade, she doesn't get to be president, Johnny does. And that's the way we run our country, and that's one of the things that we talk about, one of the structural reforms.
We will get to the electoral college in a bit.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that's fascinating in how you tell the story of of the march is the individuals who marched. And I don't know if someone comes at top of mind to you, who are some of the characters that you remember in this history, the story of the sacrifice and sometimes giving their all to.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who think, all right, he starts off with history. Oh God, history. No, this is actually, I think, pretty interesting. We tried to make this as accessible as we could. I wrote the first couple of chapters and I looked at it and said, this is reading kind of like a law review article. This is going to be, you'd read it before bed and you would be guaranteed a good 8 hours of sleep. So I said, we can't do that. And so we tell the history by looking at various people and what various people have done and tell their stories. And one who comes to mind is a woman named Alice Paul, a suffragette, a woman determined to get the right to vote for women. She marches in 1913 down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. with a group of other women. And people know about this march to some degree, but what they don't know is that these women, as they marched down Pennsylvania Avenue, which is not far from where I live, they were beaten by people on the sidelines, on the sidewalks, things thrown at them, predominantly men, trying to stop these women from getting power. She then stayed at the White House for a couple of years leading up to 1917. The night
stayed at outside the White House?
Outside the White House for a couple of years leading up to 1917, just protesting and saying, we have to have the vote. Women have to have the vote. And on a particular night in 1917, she and some other protesters were arrested, taken to the D.C. jail. They then go on a hunger strike, and then tubes were put down their noses in a very unbelievably rough, terrible manner, and they were force-fed. Woodrow Wilson hears about this. He had been kind of on the fence, but hears about the way in which these women had been treated, and then ultimately says, you know what, I will express my support for the amendment that will grant suffrage to women. And so the history part is about individuals who did extraordinary things, so-called ordinary Americans who did extraordinary things. And my hope was to convince people in this time that the individual can still matter. And it's not because Eric Holder is saying it, but because I can point to people in our past who did extraordinary things. And we talk about people in the present as well. But the capacity within all of us to bring about that kind of change exists.
Of course, the civil rights movement is full of such individuals, and a very moving part of this book is when you tell the story of going back to Selma and marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with some of the heroes of that time, of that march across the bridge, John Lewis included. What does that do for you personally, not having actually participated in the original march over the bridge, but being there to kind of recreate it?
Yeah, it was really pretty emotional. 2015 was the 50th anniversary of the march, Bloody Sunday going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and I was there with President Obama, John Lewis, President Bush, and I saw that happen in 1965. I was 14 years old, right? People calculating now. Yeah, I'm that old. And I remember watching on my black and white TV, for those of you who are young, there were these things called black and white TVs, and watching these marchers, trying to march for voting rights, get beaten by these state troopers, and kind of not growing up in New York City, not quite understand, what's this kind of all about, piqued my interest, and I think is the thing that really kind of started me on the road. That, plus an incident that happened in 1963 when my late sister-in-law integrated the University of Alabama when George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door. Those things really kind of interested me in civic life. And so the thought that I would be there as Attorney General of the United States, with John Lewis, who we used to always say, "This is my friend Eric here." And I could never, as I say, I could never call John Lewis my friend. I mean, he was a great man. It was great that we had a wonderful relationship, but he's an icon. You can't be a friend to an icon, you know? And to be there with him, you know, locking arms and walking over the Edmund Pettus Bridge and keeping in my own mind those black and white pictures of seeing the young John Lewis with the backpack, you know, marching ahead, and then, you know, the state troopers with the batons and him trying to cover his head, and to think that I'm walking with this icon, this one of the people who I consider the second group of founding fathers, you know, one of the second founders, because the civil rights movement created a nation that did not exist before. They destroyed a system of American apartheid and made this nation better, and to be with him, in addition to this guy, Barack Obama, you know, but to be with him on that bridge at that time, and also with George Bush, you know, he was there. He signed the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And though I had policy differences with President Bush, he's actually a really nice man. He's a decent man. He's funny as anything. And it was good that he said that, you know, he thought that he needed to be there to be a part of that celebration.
You mentioned the Voting Rights Act, and that's kind of one of the more recent turning points in this long march when we get to the Shelby decision.
Right.
And I know you don't want us to use Shelby.
It's actually called Shelby County versus Holder.
Yeah.
But I don't ever want my name associated with that case. So if you want to like piss me off, you say the Shelby County versus Holder. That's like being, you know, like Dred Scott versus Holder. You would never want your name to be associated with a case that bad, you know? So it's kind of like, it's just the Shelby County case, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, right. Now that we've clarified that, what was it that Shelby did to the Voting Rights Act that was so harmful to the nation?
Well, without getting too technical, it essentially crippled, it blew a hole in the Voting Rights Act and took away from the Justice Department the ability to pre-clear voting changes, electoral changes that states or localities that were covered jurisdictions would try to put in place. For instance, if a state, you know, it was predominantly the old South, but it was also parts of the North as well. If you wanted to close a polling place in Mississippi, and you were covered jurisdiction, you had to go to the Justice Department to ask, you know, if you could get permission to do that. If you wanted to shorten voting hours, you had to do those kinds of things. The Shelby County case took that power away from the Justice Department and essentially gave the states and these localities kind of free rein to do that which they wanted to do. And it didn't take years for the states to do things. It didn't even take months. It took weeks for the states, after the Shelby County case was decided, to put into place a whole bunch of unnecessary voter suppressive requirements. This notion of photo ID, for instance, certainly that suddenly raised its head. You know, a great concern about electoral integrity, about people casting in-person fraudulent ballots. All of a sudden that became something that people in these jurisdictions wanted to deal with. Interestingly, Texas really kind of led the way. Texas is the hardest place in the country to vote. It is the hardest place in the country to vote. They put in a photo ID law to give you a sense of this. They said, all right, if you have a photo ID, state issue, that says that you can carry a concealed weapon, carry a gun, whatever, all right, cool, you can vote. If you are a student, has a state-issued photo ID from the University of Texas, says you're a resident of Texas, that's not good, you know? So the photo ID, you say, yeah, we want to stop fraud and all that kind of stuff, but you can see the value judgment that they're making. You know, those who carry concealed weapons, guns, that's fine. Students, state-issued ID, picture and all that stuff, that wasn't fine. And so Shelby County took away from that. Had the Shelby County case not been decided, the Justice Department clearly would have opposed that. And I suspect if Texas didn't fold and it actually had gone to trial in a special court that's set up in Washington, D.C., the Justice Department would have won. Since Shelby County, 1,700 polling places have been closed around the country, predominantly in communities of color. Voter purges have gone up 40%, predominantly in communities of color, all of which could have been stopped by a Justice Department that had not been depowered by the Shelby County case.
So let's talk about some of the remedies that you're supporting here. Voting access, registration, actually access to the ballot box. What are the remedies we can do with Shelby gone?
Well,
having the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things is that we have to redo the Voting Rights Act. And, you know, we have to pass a Voting Rights Act that will pass constitutional muster and not only have it cover the old South, but to cover the nation as a whole. Because the reality is that you all in Minnesota live right next door to the most gerrymandered state in the country now, Wisconsin. It's not just a question of what's going on in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. Wisconsin is got problems. Ohio, you've got problems. And so we need a new Voting Rights Act. But what I also talk about are ways in which we make it easier to vote, not harder to vote. Let's make it so that we have a guarantee of 14 days, federal standards, 14 days of early voting. Make it so that you have automatic voter registration. You find that the biggest impediment to people voting who say they want to vote, the biggest impediment is that they're not registered. And you have to go through all kinds of things to register in a variety of places. So automatic voter registration. North Carolina had a program when you were 17 years old in high school, you were automatically registered to vote. And when then you turned 18, you could cast a ballot. Republicans took over the legislature and had governorship, and they did away with that. Never quite understood how you could justify that. You know, but a whole range of things like that. Automatic voter registration, the re-enfranchisement of people who had been in the criminal justice system, felon re-enfranchisement. That is something that I think should occur. People in Florida, you know, we're a pretty divided nation. About 65% of the folks in Florida said, you know what? People who have served their time ought to have the ability to cast a ballot. We're going to re-enfranchise them. It would have been the largest re-enfranchisement since the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Republican legislature there, through a variety of ways, essentially did away with that which the people of Florida said that they wanted to do. Outlaw partisan and racial gerrymandering, another thing that I think we need to do that takes power away from you know, regular Americans.
To reinstate the Voting Rights Act would require legislation,
Yes.
federal legislation.
Yep.
Tell us about the filibuster.
Got to go. Got to go. Got to go. If you look at the use of the filibuster from the beginning of the Republic, it's like this. It only actually starts in the 18th century. It goes like this, and then maybe the last 7, 8 years goes up like that, the use of the filibuster. There are actually people, you know, a lot of folks believe that to pass something in the Senate, you have to have 60 votes. No, you don't. That's only because you have the filibuster. The founders considered whether or not you should have supermajorities in order to pass legislation, but because of the bad interactions we had, bad experience we had with the Articles of Confederation, they said, no, majority rule is what should decide. The filibuster has been used primarily until recently to stop civil rights bills. That's when you saw the filibuster. But now it's being used just as a matter of routine. Used to, you know, we think of the filibuster in the old days. Jimmy Stewart, you know, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, standing up there for like 40 hours. He can barely talk, and he's still, you know, and he's stopping.
That was a good Jimmy Stewart imitation.
Yeah. Doing, you know, all this stuff to stop these, you know, corrupt things from happening. Now the filibuster is you just call up from your office and say, hey, I'm filibustering the bill. I said, the senator probably doesn't even have to do it. Probably a staffer calls in. You don't identify who the senator is, and that means that you've then got to have 60 votes in order to do away with it. And the way in which we have, you know, 2 senators per state means that you can, through the filibuster, have senators who represent about 20% of the nation's population put in place a filibuster that can't be overridden and stop, you know, legislation. And so the filibuster has got to go. You know, Democrats had that opportunity in the last session of Congress. Senators Sinema and Manchin would not go along with it, and as a result, we did not have the ability to do a lot of the things that I talk about in the book that we could have done if we had done away with the filibuster. It's not likely to happen. Say, well, it's not going to happen. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. I was thinking, no, it's still not going to happen. Even at 51, you'd have to get either Sinema or Manchin to go along, and that's just not likely to happen.
Speaking of doing away with things, you have some thoughts about the Electoral College.
Yep, got to go. If you think about the Electoral College again, you can win more votes and still lose the election, which is counterintuitive to me if we are truly a democracy. But the other impact of the Electoral College is that we focus our attention on a few states that are so-called swing states. Republican presidential candidates never campaign in New York, never campaign in California, because they're not going to win there. Democrats don't campaign in Texas to any great degree, or in the southern states. If you did away with the Electoral College and just the greatest number of votes would decide who the president was, you would have people. Now, it means Iowa would probably not get as much attention as it does. Sorry. But California would get a lot more attention. New York would get a lot more attention. And you would have candidates really campaigning on a national basis around the country, and that would make a great deal of sense. The notion that we end up with presidents, and again, like I said, I had big policy differences with President Bush. He was elected, that was a close one, 600 votes, whatever it was. Donald Trump lost by almost 3 million votes, and nevertheless did all the stuff that he did. And so when I'm in Europe and people say, well, boy, the American people, how could the American people have voted for Trump? And I said, the American people did not vote for Trump. The Electoral College put him in place. And you want to talk about the dangers of it. I mean, after 4 years of Donald Trump, he lost by 7 million votes, but the vote in the Electoral College was relatively close. If you'd had a shift of about 75,000 votes in, I guess, 3, maybe 4 states, 75,000 total in those 3-4 states, he would have been elected president, having lost the popular vote by 7 million. And so that kind of system, it seems to me, simply can't stay in place. It is fundamentally anti-democratic, and I think harmful to our desire to be more unified. If you have the greatest number of people expressing belief in a particular candidate, and then that candidate doesn't have the ability to get the powers of the presidency, or if you have a system because of the way in which people are distributed around the country, that you have people who run for office just focusing on these so-called swing states, but ignoring, the vast majority of the people. Again, that is not something that is designed to promote the kind of unity that I think this nation so sorely needs.
Supreme Court. You have thoughts about the Supreme Court?
Got to go. No. Just kidding. This iteration of the Supreme Court. Okay, anyway. All right. No, the Supreme Court, my big concern there, if you look at the beginning of the Republic, people who serve on the Supreme Court, all federal judges, have lifetime tenure. That is to insulate them from political pressure, and that's a good thing. That was set up in the latter part of the 18th century, when people didn't live nearly as long as we now do. And so life tenure didn't mean like you serve on the court for 30 and 40 years. Most of the people who left the court in the early part of the Republic left because they died. Now we have a system where people, this is Democrats as well as Republicans, live longer and have the ability to decide when they're going to retire, even after they've served 30 years or so, and say, well, I'll wait for a Democrat like Justice Breyer. He resigns. Justice Kennedy waited for a Republican. He resigned. Justice O'Connor waited for a Republican. She resigns. And so it's a self-perpetuating thing. You get the majority, and then unless there's something, a tragic accident, an unexpected death, but even there, talk about what the Scalia seat, but that's a whole other deal. You know, the justices are deciding who, at least ideologically, their successors will be. But at a more fundamental level, the notion that you put people on the court now, you know, in their 50s, and with the hope that they'll serve, you know, 30, 40 years, that is too much power in the hands of an unelected person to have for that extended a period of time. And so my recommendation is that we should limit them to 18-year terms. And it's interesting because Chief Justice Roberts and I don't agree on an awful lot, but I quote him in a speech, I think I set out a good portion of the speech, where he says that justices should serve for a period of 15 years. So even he sees the value in having, you know, finite terms.
So these various remedies you've described, Supreme Court, Electoral College, filibuster, we didn't even get to gerrymandering and redistricting, but what is the likelihood of all that coming to pass?
Yeah, you know, people look at this stuff and say, you know, you're a dreamer, it's not going to happen. And yet, you know, that's why the history part, I think, is so important. Because other people imagined an America that they had never experienced. They fought for an America that they had never lived in. They imagined a better version of the America that they were, that they existed in. And that's, I think, what we have to do. And so, yeah, these are pretty extensive changes. And I don't think they're all going to happen at once, but this is, I think, a pretty good democracy menu that over time, I think, can actually occur. And I actually think that some of the things that are in there actually have to happen if we're going to become a more unified nation, if we're going to be truer to our founding ideals. So I'm actually pretty optimistic. It's not going to come easily, but the book always shows that, you know, all the changes that we kind of take for granted, you know, universal suffrage, you know, a whole variety of things, none of it came easy. I mean, Alice Paul had a tube, you know, stuck down her throat, was beaten as she marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in 1913. That wasn't easy. You know, Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, 1964, that Freedom Summer, they were trying to register people to vote. They gave their lives. What were their last thoughts as they were, you know, murdered and Clay, you know, at least one of them was buried alive. You know, what were they thinking? They were there to fight for an America that did not exist in Mississippi where they were, but they could imagine that better America. So I think if we stay close to our creativity, stay close to our founding ideals, the possibility that all of these things can happen, I think, is real.
One last question from me, and it's time for you all to write your questions down. We'll collect them in a moment.
But they can only be easy questions.
Why
are you laughing? I'm serious. Only easy questions.
I think this is probably on the mind of many people here, those viewing as well. What's your take on the midterms?
It was a good day for good day for American democracy. You know, for the last 18 months or so, I have been saying in speeches, and I've got the speeches, I'll show them to you. I've been saying, you know what, inflation is important. The ability to get baby formula is important. You know, our economic worries, that's all important. But what's on the ballot and what's most important is our democracy. That has to be the thing that people keep most in their mind as they cast their ballots. And we've done some preliminary research looking at kind of the data that we're getting at the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, at the NDRC. And the big motivators we're finding now were democracy and reproductive rights. Those appear to be the things that drove people to a greater degree than expected. Now, inflation was up there, but it was those three things. And in New York, crime was also a big thing. But those the big three, and in different states, democracy and reproductive rights were, you know, actually 1 and 2. So I think that what we found was that the American people care about our democracy, that they were concerned about these election deniers, concerned about the coup attempt on January the 6th, and the revelations that we've seen from the, you know, the January 6th committee. I think what we saw was, you know, it was a good day for my party, and there's no question about that. I mean, an unexpectedly good day for Democrats. But I don't think that in some ways should be the main story. The main story should be that the American people in substantial numbers cast ballots for people who they thought would protect our democracy.
Good. Thank you for that. We're going to move to the, I almost said congregation, the audience. If you've got a question for Mr. Holder, if you would please hold that up. Ushers will come down the aisles and pick those up. If you're watching online, just put into the chat whatever comment or question you would like to have presented. We'll try to get to as many as possible. And while the ushers are collecting these questions, let me remind everyone this is the Westminster Town Hall Forum coming to you from Westminster Presbyterian Church in downtown Minneapolis. I'm Tim Hart Anderson, the senior minister here at Westminster and moderator of the forum, and our guest is former Attorney General Eric Holder. This evening's program is co-sponsored by the Minneapolis Foundation. We'd like to thank them for their generous support of tonight's important conversation with Mr. Holder. Learn more about them and about their work in the community at minneapolisfoundation.org. And I'd like also to thank our broadcast partner, Minnesota Public Radio. These fall forums will be broadcasted as a special week-long from the first week of December, Monday through Thursday. One program from Healing Our House Divided will air each day at noon. One program is live on Thursday here in the sanctuary. And then MinnPost and Sahan Journal, thank you for covering the forum and covering so much Minnesota news. And now, Mr. Holder, let's turn to questions.
No, just before we do this, I saw a question actually given by Attorney General Ellison. No. No, wait a minute. I do not want to answer his question. He knows me too well, and he'll say, Eric, what about the time? No, we're not going there, Keith. So get your card back.
I hope you put your name on it, Keith, so I'll be able to ask you. E.J. Dionne spoke here at the forum earlier this year with Miles Rappaport, and they are making the case that voting should be mandatory, like jury service.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? I know you're supportive of Election Day being a national holiday, but what do you think about mandatory voting?
You know, if you give, all right, so I need like 48 hours of total power. You know, give Eric 48 hours of total power. And we do this stuff real easy. But that's something I think that I would actually mandate, you know, that you have to go to the polls. They do this in Australia, New Zealand, and so you go to the polls, you have to vote. Now, but you have to give people the choice. You vote for, candidate Y, candidate Z, but you could also have a box that says none of the above, or I can't stand these idiots, something like that. But somehow, that's not likely to happen. And so I think what we try to do is to try to make people understand the power of their votes, the sacrifices that were made by people to get us to this place where people now have the vote. If you're a woman, a person of color, a man, people died so that you would have the ability to vote. And people tell me, well, my vote doesn't matter. Really? If your vote doesn't matter, why do you think they're trying so hard to deprive you of it or to make it more difficult for you to vote,
Is it your view that the January 6th committee investigating that incident, that attempted coup, is that advancing democracy?
Absolutely.
In what ways?
Because it reveals to us, again, the fragility of our democracy. Everybody says, oh, our system's held. Yeah, they did, but just barely. If Mike Pence had decided for whatever reason to recognize or to say, well, we've got some, problems with the Arizona vote. We've got some problems with the Michigan vote here. I'm not going to recognize those things. I mean, there would have been howls and everything, but it's entirely possible you might have thrown the election into the House of Representatives where the states then vote. Each state has one vote, and there are more Republican states than Democratic states. Trump could have won the election. And so the January 6th committee, by exposing all that went into the coup and the attempts to subvert our democracy, I think raised the consciousness of people in a way that maybe nothing else has, about both the fragility of our democracy and the need to protect it. And so I give them, a great amount of, respect. They're going to have to write like anything because, come January, they're clearly going to be gone. But they have done, I think, a great service in exposing not only what happened on January the 6th, but also I think to engender conversation and concerns more generally about our democracy.
The Attorney General has the Attorney General Merrick Garland has appointed a special counsel. What's your feeling about that, to pursue the possibility of charges against a former president?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did an interview with David Axelrod probably a couple of years ago. So, I was going to say a couple of years ago, but that's pandemic years. Everything, it seems like a couple of years ago, but it was actually before the pandemic, so it was, I guess, longer than that. And he asked me that question. And I said, I'd be really hesitant to bring charges against the former president. Very divisive. Sometimes, as bad as it might be, it's better to kind of move on. And I said the pardon of Nixon by Ford, controversial, but at least it allowed the nation to move on. That was Eric then. Now, having understood the depths and the breadth of what Trump and his acolytes, confederates, co-conspirators, what they did, I'm of the view that unless they are held accountable, including the former president, we send a dangerous message that says you can attempt a coup, you can try to subvert this democracy in the most basic way, and the only thing that will happen is that maybe your reputation will be stained. You will not suffer any kind of criminal consequence. And so I think that if the facts are there and if the law is there, that charges should be brought against the former president.
Apparently, you could run for office in Minnesota and you'd be elected. Have you?
Yeah, but
have
Keith Ellison has the job I want, though,
Have you ever thought about running for office?
Yeah, I did. I thought about running for mayor of Washington, D.C. after I'd been the United States attorney there. And my lovely wife, she's an OBGYN. As I said, she's the sister of Vivian Malone, who integrated the University of Alabama. Yeah. She's the love of my life. And she said, you know what? You would be a great mayor. You'd be a great mayor. And you'd be serving as a single man. And then I thought about running for president, I guess in 2020. And I said, all right, we did some polling. It looked pretty good, the possibilities were there. No sure shot, but it looked pretty good. I talked to Barack, and stuff, right? And I said, I will take a poll. The first poll, took a poll in my house. I have 3 kids and my lovely wife. It's 4-1.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Well, one of the students in the house here asked, what are you proudest of in your career?
Ooh. It's interesting. That's like asking me which of my kids do I like the most. And on a given day, I could answer that question, But I tend to think of, at least from my Justice Department days, to have been a part of or made decisions that helped people. The decision not to defend the Defense of Marriage Act and to stand for same-sex marriage. The work we did protecting the right to vote. The work that we did around criminal justice reform. And then standing up for institutions. The decision that I made to bring the 9/11 conspirators, to try them in New York City in federal court, which ultimately I was not able to do because of Congress. And those people are now still in Guantanamo playing volleyball, and they should have been held accountable. I mean, those are the kinds of things. But I think, I guess I'm, most proud of hopefully the work that I've done that has made this nation a little more fair, a little more just. History will ultimately, be the determiner of that.
And one of the things you did during your time as the Attorney General was you oversaw a 21st century policing task force.
Yep.
Minneapolis, of course, has had issues with policing, serious trouble. And we're reflecting on policing now in our city following the murder of George Floyd. And I wonder if there's something you learned that could help us in Minneapolis think about how our policing ought to be going.
Well, one thing I think people need as kind of a baseline, you need to understand that there's not a tension between a fair and equitable criminal justice system and fair and equitable law enforcement and public safety. You can keep people safe, and that has to be the prime concern of, Keith Ellison, my concern as Attorney General, to keep the American people safe, but to do so in a way where the system is perceived as and actually is fair. We started something in the Obama administration in 2013 called the Smart on Crime Initiative. Too many politicians always say, we're going to get tough on crime, And tough on crime too often has meant we're going to put in place more mandatory minimum sentences. We're going to take discretion away from judges. We're going to put people in jail for extended periods of time that are not commensurate with, the things that they've done. Now, people need to be held accountable, and people perhaps need to go to jail. But if you're a first-time drug seller and do so in a nonviolent way, now that's a crime, and that has negative consequences for a whole range of people, and you need to be held accountable. But at first time, you look at the federal system, depending on the amount of drugs that you had, you could go to jail for 20, 30 years. And that's one of the reasons why I was a judge for 5 years. And I had to do those kinds of things, and I said, I just can't do that. I just cannot sit up here with my a vision of what a fair sentence ought to be here and have my hands tied behind my back by what the laws that Congress has passed. So I think, the structure of law enforcement priorities, these are the things that I think have to be wrestled with by people who are in positions of power, elected officials, appointed officials, but there has to be community input as well. You can't think that you're going to get the system that you want, whether it's the criminal justice system or anything else, by simply observing. Democracy is a participatory sport. We don't get, and positive change is not promised. It only happens as a result of commitment, action, sacrifice. And so with those kind of basic tenets, my strong belief is that you've all got to be involved in the effort.
You say several times in your book, the long arc of history does not bend toward justice by itself.
Right.
Everybody's got to lean into it.
Yeah, here's the deal. Dr. King said famously that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But here's the deal. It doesn't bend on its own. It only bends when people put their hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. And that's what I think each and every one of us has to ask ourselves. What are you doing? 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 What are you doing to pull that arc towards justice? A system of American apartheid was destroyed, not because its time was over, but because people put their hands on that arc and pulled it towards justice. Women got the right to vote, not because there was a revelation of some sort. It was because women sacrificed, put their hands on that arc and pulled it towards justice. We are fully capable. Our history tells us that. We are fully capable if we put our hands on that arc in great numbers, with a sustained effort. We can pull that arc towards justice. We can put this country in a place where it has never been and where it should be. You think about it. My father, during World War II, served in the Army. He only served here in the United States, and he said he did his job great. Japanese never got into the country. The Germans never got into the country. I said, okay, Dad, that's your story. We'll go with that. He's born in Barbados, comes to the United States, enlists in the Army at the age of 40 during the war. And while he's in uniform in North Carolina, he's told to get to the back of a bus. He's never experienced it before. He's Barbados to New York. He's in uniform, in war. and he's told to go to the back of the bus. He's in Kansas, and he's told to go around to the side to get a hamburger. He's kind of like, what is this all about? Well, the deal is his boy becomes the Attorney General of the United States. And that shows the progress. That shows the progress that this nation can make. But it didn't just happen. Between Sonny Holder, Eric Holder, the original Eric Holder, Sonny Holder, and Eric Holder Jr., a whole bunch of people had to do a whole bunch of things to make my appointment as Attorney General of the United States possible. And so in that personal story, there is an example of what happens if we all put our hands on that arc and pull it towards justice.
Several questions want us to go back to the Electoral College. And how does that change, or is there a kind of another way to work around that, which you describe in your book?
Yeah, I mean, to change the Electoral College, the best way would be to amend the Constitution. The likelihood of that happening is pretty slim. So there is this thing called the Interstate Voter Compact, which says that each state would decide, each state signs into the compact, it says we'll take our electoral votes and not cast our votes for who got the greatest number of votes in our state. We'll cast our electoral votes for who won the national popular vote. And if you do that, the Electoral College would then reflect the popular will. And you don't even need to have all the states agree to do this. You only need to have states totaling 270 electoral votes, which is the majority in the Electoral College. And if you get states totaling 270 electoral votes saying we'll cast our votes for who won the popular vote, you essentially render meaningless the Electoral College. This effort is underway. Their compact now has about 193, 195 electoral votes. States have agreed to it. It's a self-executing thing, which means once it gets 270, it immediately goes into effect. Michigan is the next state that will be considering it. It's going to be difficult because you're going to have to go through some states now that if not are Republican or purple, and it's going to be difficult to get from 193, 195 to 270. But that's one of the ways, and that's one of the suggestions I have in the book to to neuter the Electoral College.
We should note that Minnesota, Mr. Allison, has not yet signed on with this. You said earlier we need to do stuff. There's one right there you can do. We've got some young people in the house here, and one of them has written this question: how can youth, tomorrow's problem solvers, work for these necessary changes? What would you advise young people?
Well, at a basic level, where are these folks?
Over there to the right.
Over there, all right.
Wave around so we can see where you are.
All right. They're distressingly young, yes. Well, one thing I would certainly say is that young people, if you look at the demographic from 18 to 29, that is now the largest voting bloc in the country. Largest voting bloc in the country. But they have far less power than boomers, my generation, because we vote in far greater numbers proportionally than they do. And so a basic thing is that young people have to vote. Young people are the differences. Again, just looking at some preliminary statistics, actually just looking at the race in Georgia, I saw some numbers reported. If you look at voters 18 to 29, they are for Warnock over Herschel Walker like 70 to 30. If you go above 40, Walker is beating Warnock in terms of voters. Some preliminary stuff that we've seen, again, looking kind of nationwide, and this is all preliminary stuff. Democrats won by resounding numbers, the 18 to 29 vote, but lost every other demographic, every other age demographic. The closer you got to 29, the margins were slimmer, and when you got to people like me above 65, we did all kinds of wrong stuff. And so they have to vote in greater numbers because the reality is elections are certainly a referendum on, the performance of the people who are running, but it's also about the future, And so when we talk about climate, when we talk about reproductive freedoms, criminal justice reform, religious freedoms, this is all, this is stuff that will be decided in legislatures, in Congress, and young people have the capacity to shape the America that we will have. And so I would urge them to certainly vote, if they're not old enough to vote, to become engaged in our civic life, and to be parts of organizations that are engaged in governmental things. But even beyond that, to be engaged in just the lives of their communities. And I'd say this for those of us who may be not as young, but who are young at heart. Take a way in which you can find an hour or 2 hours a week to be engaged in your community, to help, maybe kids who are starved for the kind of attention that every American child is entitled to. It won't be easy, you have important business lives and personal lives. Find an extra hour or two to do that, but you're going to feel better about yourself at the end of that week. You're certainly going to help the people that you are interacting with, and you're going to have a positive impact on the nation. And so I would certainly urge young people to do that, but I would not leave it there. I think this is something that we all should be doing, asking ourselves again, what am I doing to pull that arc towards justice?
Thank you for that hopeful note. We'll end there. Thank you, Eric Holder, for being here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Well done.
Okay.
And you're heading out
This way.
that way.
Okay.
We're going to ask you to be seated. We're going to ask you to be seated for just a moment here. We want to give the Attorney General a chance to exit the building with his team. Thank you for being here. Shonda Smith-Baker, you're in the room someplace. Shonda, thank you for the Minneapolis Foundation for your support of this. Awesome. Good work. And we're grateful to our media sponsors, Sahan Journal, NPR, MinnPost. Next forum is Chris Blattman on December 8th. Remember, those of you who parked down below, don't leave and come back after 8 thinking you can get your car. Breads and Spreads in Westminster Hall, we'll see you there. Interfaith Thanksgiving service, 10 o'clock Thursday, Hennepin Avenue Methodist. We'll see you there. Bye. Thanks for being here.